Everyone has some sort of a closet that's become too small. A closet is no place to live, and I want to support as many people as I can in stepping out of that prison into the fullness of life that's waiting for them on the other side of that closet door. I'm Nancy Shadlock from Centered Life Coaching. Join me in listening to these Coming Out Chronicles. Get curious about your story, and then see what good things are waiting for you on the other side of your closet door.
Today's episode is so interesting. I wasn't quite sure where it was going to go. And of course, it was a winding, meandering way through many coming out stories, which is kind of the best. So imagine if you had a partner who was your life partner and you didn't live with them, you didn't have sex with them, and yet you were like deeply connected and committed to them. You get to understand a little bit more of what that might look like in today's episode. I don't think there's any huge trigger warnings in this one. Sadly, because there's not really any talk of religion in this one, which is so crazy to me that whenever there's talk of religion in coming out stories, that's when the trigger warnings have to be given. There's so much pain that comes with that. But today's is a really cool exploration of many different ways of being in the world and ways of being more yourself. So I hope you learn something about yourself and some way that you might want to be more yourself in listening to today's episode. Esther Lemmens, it's so wonderful to have you on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me, Nancy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm curious where we're going to go with this. So I'm excited for you to share with us the nature of your coming out story.
Well, there are several actually, and it's kind of
I
a journey.
figured.
It's kind of, yeah, it's always an in progress thing, isn't it? So I think the first coming out story is being pansexual, I guess. Yeah, I would start with that.
Mm-hmm. When did you discover that for yourself?
Well, basically, when I met my transgender partner, and that's about 9 years ago now, when we were at this, it was a work project that had like a launch night or just a get to know everyone night. And I remember seeing them and thinking to myself, oh, I wonder if this person is a man or a woman. And interestingly, obviously, I had not heard the term non binary at the time. So now I would be asking a very different question,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Mm-hmm.
But at the time, that's what I wondered. And yeah, so that's kind of that question kind of hung in the air. And then I saw them later on as people had left and stuff, and the place was a bit emptier. I saw them chatting to a friend of mine, and I saw, boobs. I thought, okay, woman. And then I got a bit closer and I heard them speaking, and I thought, hang on, that's not ordinary woman. Yeah, quite a deep voice and everything. And yeah, I was just quite intrigued, really. But that aside, we just got chatting and we hit it off. And decided to just go out for a drink, got to know each other. It was not like a date or anything. I was seeing someone at the time, so that was not the idea behind it, but just like a friendly thing. And well, things just kind of developed. Really, I developed feelings for them, and that. Yeah.
Hmm. Had you primarily dated men before that?
Pretty much, yeah. I have occasionally been attracted to women, but it's not as common as being attracted to guys. I lived
Mm-hmm.
a fairly, I guess, cishet normative lifestyle for a good
Mm-hmm.
while. Bit of a serial monogamist, I guess I was as well. Um, until when was it? 2006 or so, I did end up being in a throuple. So that was something completely different,
Mm-hmm.
which was interesting, very complicated. And I was obviously very clueless, as were all of us, but it was a good experience. And yeah, that was it with regards to one of those was a man, one of those was a woman. So that was the first woman I'd really dated. And yeah, and that was it. But then meeting my trans partner, at first I thought, I guess I'm bi, because I'm attracted to both, two sexes, genders, whatever. And yeah, my partner introduced me to the term pansexual, and I thought, oh, that's an interesting one, because I felt like bisexual it just didn't feel quite right, or like not complete enough. So to me, pansexual feels just more inclusive, so I like it. So I use it. Yeah.
For those who aren't familiar, like what are the subtleties of the differences of bi and pan?
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah. So officially, bi is two. So to be attracted to two genders, sexes. Again, I don't know. It's a bit of a blurry one, isn't it? So yeah, I think being bisexual can be considered quite a binary thing. Although I also have friends who are bi that are inclusive of like any and all genders. But basically bisexual means being attracted to men and women, and pansexual being attracted to people no matter what their gender is. So any and all genders, basically. Yeah.
Did it surprise you like how dating a trans person wasn't like a big thing for you? Like that you just all of a sudden were falling for this person that you couldn't quite categorize?
Yeah, it was really interesting. I was not expecting the attraction because, for one, I wasn't looking for anything at the time because I was seeing someone else. And also, more recently, I contributed to an article about being pansexual. And when I was writing some text for that, it actually occurred to me that it was not something I discovered about myself, but more like something that gave language to someone I've always been, because I've always considered myself an open-minded person in lots of things, lots of ways. So yeah, I guess it's kind of similar to how a lot of people I talk to speak about gender when they come across the term, trans or non-binary or any other labels, and they're like, yes, that's exactly it. And it's not like, oh, I've discovered this is what I am, but it's like that just gives language to who I always known I've been, in that kind of way. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And almost like there's a freedom in falling in love with someone who it
Yeah.
embodies all these different things that you love all of.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I have used the term being the best of both worlds, although I've also had a conversation with someone recently in a podcast who doesn't like that terminology as such. But yeah, at the time, I really felt like they just had this insight about, I don't know, a very unique insight, I suppose, into sort of masculine and feminine and sort of blurring the lines and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I found it fascinating. I've since met a lot more people, gender non-conforming people, and a lot of them I call friends, especially locally. And yeah, it's just been eye-opening, really, really. Wow.
That's awesome. What other coming out stories come to mind then?
Well, the most recent one, I guess, is I really like the term solo-poly or solo-polyam. And I've again, I think it's one of those things that I've always been, I think, polyamorous. But it's a fairly new thing that I'm exploring because I don't know. It's just one of those things. I mean, my partner came out as asexual some years ago. They've had surgery. I've gone through their, we've gone through this gender journey. Kind of, I've gone along with them through that. Obviously, they're the ones that've gone through that. Let me put that out there.
Right.
But yeah, I've kind of been there, observing, and yeah, and I felt like the whole cis heteronormative thing has never really worked for me, to be honest. I think I've always tried to fit into that thing because that's kind of what is expected, I suppose. And I, for a lot of years, especially when I was younger, I didn't know any better. But I've always also been reluctant about it. Like I've never gotten married, I never wanted kids. So there's always been this sort of awkward looking on what other people are doing and thinking, I'm really not sure about this, and I'm really not sure it is for me. So yeah, for me, it means like I'm kind of very independent. So that's where the solo part of the polyamory comes in. So I'm very independent. I like living on my own, having my own space. And yeah, and I feel like I just want the freedom to connect to people and love people in any way possible, like without restrictions or inhibitions. Yeah, that's kind of what that means to me. Yeah.
So that means you live on your own right now. Is that
I do,
correct?
Yeah.
And
I
you,
did live with my partner for a while, but that was not ideal. We've got very different ideas of how to live, basically, because I'm quite minimalist, whereas they're quite the opposite. And yeah, so that was difficult. It wasn't, the difficulty wasn't between us two as in the relationship. That was fine, and we got on well, and we got on quite easily alongside each other in that way. But the being in a place that was more cluttered, you know, for me, like energetically, just wasn't really good for me. So I was the one that said, like, I lived with them for 2 years, and I'm the one that eventually said, look, I need my own space. And they weren't sure about that at first. But now, well, that's a good few years ago now, actually. So I've had this place for about 6 years, I think. I did have a flatmate at first, like a lodger, but they moved out after about a year. So since then, I've been here on my own, and I just really love it. You know, I do really love it as an introvert as well. So I can basically just be in my own space and do things my way. Yeah, that works well for me. Yeah.
What does partnership look like then? Like, I think a lot of people listening might be like, well, if she's not having sex with them and not living with them, like what does it mean to be partnered to someone?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We've been talking about, like, even terminology, because labels and words are quite challenging, aren't they? Like giving language to something that is just so uncommon, I suppose. Yeah, so for a while, like a while ago, I was thinking about the term like queer platonic partner. That's a thing. And then I talked to my partner about it, and they were like, I really like the term post-sexual. And I thought, okay, that's fair. Yeah. So it's like, because it's not quite platonic, there's more there, but also it is very unusual. You know, it's not like your regular conventional arrangement as such.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is really tricky to find language for it. And I still really haven't figured it out. I like the term, you know, post-sexual partner or relationship. Yeah. And we still spend like regular time together. We enjoy things like food together. We yeah, like creative, like brainstorming, you know, there's all sorts of things that we've got that we still share, you know, that we shared from the start and that we still share, and some not. Also cats. My partner has all the cats. There's quite a few of them. And so yeah, and I have a very minimal place, and I have no cats except my Pusheen on the sofa there. Yeah, so that's lovely, really. Yeah, but it is a tricky thing to give language to. So, but I hope that makes some sense.
Yeah. Like in a typical week, how much would you hang out together? Or is there like any rhythms? How does that work?
Well, there was, but now with COVID, it's a bit different. But what we used to do was I would spend 1 or 2 days at the weekends there, and they love to cook, so they would cook food, and we would enjoy food together and have nice wine and other drinks with it, while fighting off the cats mostly. And then we would also go out for dinner, like during the week, once, sometimes twice. It varied, and yeah, that was really lovely, actually. So we'd get a bit of, it was kind of a balanced way of doing it, you know. So that was really nice. But we haven't obviously been able to go out for dinner much. We've tried to when the lockdown has lifted, you know, even briefly. We're like, let's go out for dinner, you know. So yeah, so things have had to change quite a bit. But yeah, that was a nice way to do things. That was good. Yeah.
And then when you say you have added polyamory into it, like how does that look, and what was that conversation like with your partner?
Well, it's always been yeah, it's kind of always been on the table as such, because we talked about it from the start, basically. And we, in theory, for a good while, started kind of off as having an open relationship, but neither of us really acted on it or did anything with it. And even when the sexual side between us kind of fizzled out, I suppose, it was very much a matter of, let's just keep talking. It's not an issue right now. If it ever becomes an issue, then we can talk about it and see what, you know, how we're going to deal with it, basically. And I think for a while, I sort of just, I think, channeled all that energy. Like there's like sexual energy, creative energy, very sacral, isn't it? So if you're into chakras and stuff. But I think I kind of just channeled that into different things. I just had like a heightened creativity and all that. I don't know. That was just, it was not an issue. I was not missing it for a while. But then I also realized after a while that I just sort of, that side of me sort of had gone dormant a little bit, and I've maybe been denying it. So I felt like I need to stop doing that. Basically, I'm not saying like I need to go out and have sex with people. It was more like there's this part of me that I'm not expressing or recognizing, and I just need to let it be there and see what shape that takes, you know. So yeah. And yeah, so near the end of last year, I started seeing someone, but that is all very, it's also like, how do you give language to it? I call them my squish, because it's like, I like the word squish. Officially it means a platonic crush, but it's got lots of layers to it, and we're like, let's just see how this goes. And yeah, so obviously they know, my partner knows that. They know each other, but that's kind of all there is to it. All there is to it doesn't sound very, you know, like that's all there is to
Probably
it.
a lot.
There's a lot to it. Yeah, there is a lot to it, and I wouldn't even know how to find the words to really describe it all. But yeah, so it's very much an exploration, and I am learning so much from all that. And I mean, I've gotten some books as well, because like the whole thing, if you're starting to open yourself to that route, you know, of going down the polyamory route, it's very much like, okay, this is interesting, but how does this really work? You know, and what's going on? So I've got a few books. I've read one, not the other one yet. And also it really is, it can be really confronting, because it will bring up any relationship issues you have. How you're not communicating well, old conditioning, you know, all sorts of stuff. It will bring that up. So it was in ways really lovely to be seeing this person. And at the same time, the whole dynamic of it was really, really triggering on so many levels. So I've had to really work through a lot of stuff. I've got a therapist, so that's good. That's good to have that support. And that's been really essential, to be fair. And I've got other support in place, like I do energy work as well with people, and that's really good for me. Yeah, so it's been really enlightening, to be honest. And a lot of the things that, I mean, people have a lot of preconceptions and ideas about polyamory that it's not, basically. But yeah, I think especially if you look at something like, okay, what would you consider polyamory 101? You could consider that relationship 101, because it's just about communicating, being honest, and you have to be honest about your own feelings as well, first and foremost, before you can communicate them to someone else. So yeah, and it will confront you with things. It will make you deal with things like jealousy and stuff. I mean, at the moment, obviously my partner is asexual, so they're not seeing anyone else. And even if they were, it wouldn't be, you know, on a physical level, probably. My squish is also not seeing anyone else at the moment. But if either of them did at one point, I would have to learn to deal with that, because I'm sure things like jealousy would come up. You know, there is stuff that will come up, and you have to just deal with it as it occurs. But it's definitely not, because people think, oh, you know, it's just having your cake and eating it, you know, all that stuff, which is a stupid expression, because like, why would you have cake and not eat it? Okay. Anyway, that aside. But it's like, yeah, people have all these ideas about it, and they're mostly wrong. So yeah, it's very, like, a lot of it is really common sense. And oh god, when you start digging into it, you're like, yes, of course, this is the thing, you know, this is a thing, this is how it works. Yes, absolutely. You know, consent is a big thing, communication, and yeah, wow. But yeah, I think I went off on one there.
Yeah, like, I want to hear, what's one of the biggest things you've learned about yourself through all this?
That I had very, very conditioned ideas about relationships that basically were not working for me nor for my relationships. It's hindsight, isn't it? It's incredible. Yeah, so quite dysfunctional, really, dysfunctional stuff, but that most people would consider normal. It's considered normal in our, cishet patriarchal society, I suppose. But it's really like when you start looking at things for what they are, it's like, wow, this is really not working for me, or like for a lot of people, I think, but they're just in that system, I suppose. Not saying that the cishet thing is a bad thing. It's just it works for some people, and that's brilliant. But I think if it doesn't work for you, you shouldn't be made to feel like there's something wrong with you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's huge.
Mm.
To be able to confront things that you just were going along with because it was what you taught, or it was the only thing
Totally.
you've seen in life, and to
Yep.
be able to paint outside the lines and be like, oh, this is what actually I would like. And
totally, yeah. And it's really fun when you start doing that. And it's also interesting because obviously not everyone's going to like seeing you do that. So in all honesty, I have not really had any grief about it, or anyone saying I don't agree with your lifestyle, anything like that. But there might be at some point. But yeah, but it is like just embracing who you are and doing things on your terms, just doing your thing your way. Yeah. Life's too short for anything else.
But I'm guessing like you didn't always live like that. And
not at all. No.
What was life like before you started to open up all of those things?
Well, I think it was a lot of, like I said, like trying to fit into these boxes, I suppose, of like, what you get taught by society and in school and from people close to you, all the dynamics, especially in relationships, for example, because I remember just being a kid growing up and looking at people having these, normal, quote unquote, relationships. And I was just like, just looking at it thinking, really, is this how it's meant to be? I just don't, it just never really was. I never really just got my head around it for some reason. And at the same time, it's kind of what is expected of you as well. And you're like, not at all sure about that. And yeah, it took a while for me to even come across someone who was bisexual, for example, as I was growing up. I think in my teens, maybe I knew a few gay people, a few lesbians, but not a huge amount. And not even rarer with the bisexuals. I remember meeting a bisexual woman once, and I was like, oh, wow. I didn't even know that was a thing, really. I must have been around about 20 or so, maybe. I'm not sure. And yeah, but even then, like I said, that was very rare. And I just kind of got on with it and, fell in love with guys, and for the most part. And yeah, just got on with it. And I think as I was in those relationships, though, there were always things that just did not work, or did not work after a while, So I always felt like I was the one growing and evolving and becoming more of me. And I felt like the other person a lot of the time was kind of staying in one spot. So we always grew apart. That's what I've always seen happen in relationships. Yeah. And then, I don't know. Yeah. I moved to the UK. I was born in the Netherlands, moved to the UK. Just, I think my world has just sort of opened since then, really. And it's been like very much a process. Yeah.
That leads me to another question, though, of
Okay.
like that sense of growing apart. Like how, with your current partner, has that been able to be sustained? Because like they've gone through a lot of changes in your time together. You've gone through a lot of changes. Like how have you been able to maintain that level of being there for each other, being connected, and letting the other grow and change so much?
That's a good question. I think it is just, I think realizing, how should I answer that? I think a lot of it is to do with sometimes we focus too much on the relationship and maybe on the other person, especially from someone like myself who was kind of raised a people pleaser, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I think you have to sometimes, what's been good for me is putting the attention back on me and what do I need? And also letting things be what they are. That's been a big theme for me recently. So I think we get conditioned with a lot of expectations of what relationships should be like. And I think when you start exploring, quote unquote, alternative ones, I think you're confronted with all that stuff. And it's almost like, yeah, I don't need one person to be the be all and end all. And I'm getting this from this person. And our dynamic is like this. And that's really just letting things be enough, Obviously, if it's not enough for you, then it's not enough for you. And that's fair.
Mm-hmm.
But also, I think it's a really fine balance, like letting things be enough and also just being open to things evolving, because we're always growing and changing. So I think it's just being there for each other as that happens, because like you say, they've gone through a lot of changes and I have too, in our own different ways. So
Yeah, that's really important to let things be as they are, let them be enough, and also listen into yourself.
Yeah,
What do I
exactly.
need in this?
Yeah, because I think I have denied my own needs for a long time, and I feel like it's one of the things that I'm working through in therapy is like, I've been a people pleaser for so long. I don't even know what my needs are sometimes, and I have to really work at it. And asking for what I need is really, really difficult. So I'm having to learn that now, and part of me is like, oh my goodness, how old are you? But better late than never, right? Yeah, sometimes we give ourselves a hard
human
time.
thing.
Yeah, it's true. So so being open to learning, better skills, better relationship skills, just better communication, all that.
Well, good on you for doing that learning, because I think not everyone wakes up to that even.
No, it's not easy. Yeah.
And then I'm curious to hear about your podcast. Like you and I both started our podcast around the same time. I think that's how we started connecting, which is really fun.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm sure that you've done so much learning through your podcast, 50 Shades of Gender, which is so cool. All the interviews that you've been doing with people around gender.
Yeah, that's been amazing, actually. It's very much part of my personal journey as well, I find, because in a way, it's the first thing I think I've ever done that just came from a place inside me, and not like maybe from the mind. It's like, your rational thinking, like having a job or a career or anything like that. Because I'm a designer by profession. But this podcast, it kind of started with a book idea years ago, which was a brainstorm between me and my partner, actually. And it was like, why don't we put a book together about 50 stories of local gender diverse people, which was when the whole 50 Shades of Grey was a thing. And it kind of got shelved. And then it started popping into my head again, the idea of it, a couple of years ago. And I thought, let's just have a conversation with someone. So I had a conversation with a friend. Like I said, I've met lots of local and not so local, like gender diverse people. So I said to a friend, do you want to just sit down and have a chat with me? And we record it, and then maybe I can have it transcribed, and then I'll have a chapter of the book. And then I've got one chapter, only 49 to go, But I was like, try not to think that far ahead. So we recorded it, and it was good. And then I thought, well, why don't I use the audio for something rather than just have it sit there and be transcribed? So then I thought, oh, podcast, because I've been wanting to do a podcast. I just didn't know about what. Doing it about design didn't feel all that inspiring to me. Yeah. But when the idea for the, for the gender project came about, I thought this is perfect, really. And then the podcast also can be about anyone from anywhere, whereas the book is still in the pipeline. And I do want that to be about local, like a local project. Yeah. And it's like this, I have birthed this thing, this idea, but at the same time, it's birthing me as well. And it's very much a real sort of flow of that. And it's taught me about myself. It's taught me about other people. It's taught me humility. That was a big thing. It's also made me more open to just being willing to be wrong and say something rather than saying nothing for worry of saying the wrong thing. Because I think for a long time I was like that. But now I'm like, okay, I'm just going to say this thing and it's probably wrong and I'm probably going to be sorry, but I'm going to say it and I'll see what comes out of it. You know, like sometimes when I ask questions, like the current episode I'm editing, I just remember having this conversation with this person. I'm like, oh my God, what am I saying? This is probably all wrong. And I just felt so self-conscious. And afterwards I was even like, I don't even know if I can use it. I don't know if I can air this. I'm just like, no. But then when I listened to it a few days later, I was like, it's not so bad. Just get on with it. And it's also about not censoring that, you know, and I had to, you know, I used the term and it was the wrong term. And they said, don't use that term. And I'm like, okay, I won't use it again. Thank you for educating me. And that was fine, you know.
Well, and you're educating your listeners because many of us have probably had the same slip up.
Yep, totally. Yeah, and I get stuff wrong all the time now, but I'm okay with that. Yeah. So that's a big one. And there's so much to it, really. It's it's bringing out parts of me that I didn't even know were in there, really.
Like what?
I think just putting my voice out there, because I think there is a lot of negative self-talk that we all have, and it's kind of about becoming aware of that and doing it anyway, you know. And I can even imagine, I mean, I've not had any criticism about it really, but I think if I did get criticism about it, I would be quite okay with that, because it'd be like, you know what, that's nothing I haven't said to myself. I doubt anyone can come up with anything I haven't already said to myself. And that I've obviously ignored because I'm doing it anyway. So, yeah.
Look at you, just stepping into yourself, right, left, and center.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really awesome. Great. Yeah.
Do you feel like you have any new coming outs on the horizon that you want to share with us?
New coming outs. Well, the thing is, the more I've been learning about gender, the more I've been questioning gender. Not necessarily my gender, but like gender as a concept and a construct. And it is like, the more I learn about it, the less I can make sense of it, the more questions I have. So I've been playing with labels myself, not to make light of it or anything, because it is kind of a serious thing as well, obviously. But for me, I've just adopted the term cis queer, which I really quite like. And for me, it means like, okay, I'm cis but queer, or like I am. There are a few theories I had around that, and I'm not sure what they are. I just thought about them earlier. It's almost like it's not an apology as such. Sorry, I'm cis, but I am queer, you know. Yeah, because the thing is, you can queer all sorts of things. So I feel like I'm queering cis because I'm not typically, I like to call myself generally non-conforming rather than gender non-conforming. Because I mean, I'm okay with my biology, my you know, sex and my gender, I guess, line up. But I think a lot of that has to do with how I was brought up and how I was conditioned. So it is such a fluid thing. And I do feel like a lot of the people that I know, a lot of my friends who are gender non-conforming, they feel like, you know, they're my people. I'm like, yeah, they're my people. So I don't know where this is going to take me. Cis queer is a good one at this time. I don't know if I would at some point end up with a label like non-binary. I don't know. Part of me is almost feeling like, would I be non-binary enough for that to even, you know, be allowed to use that label, quote unquote, which is a bit of a weird one, but still. Yeah, so I don't know where that goes, but I look forward to learning more and more about the subject and about myself, you know, because in the end, I think it's just all about identity, and like gender is a facet of identity, just like sexuality is, and you know, everything else really that makes up us as humans. So
I remember you saying on your podcast at one point that you might want to try drag sometime.
Oh yeah, that'd be fun. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, be a fun way to just explore
embodying
something else.
Totally. And I think everyone should do stuff like that, to be fair, just to see what it's like, just to, see what that feels like. Totally. If I ever do, I'll let you know.
Please do. Send me a picture or video.
I will do.
On Zoom, there's a new feature where you can add facial hair or different things to yourself just on the camera. And I did it the other day and took a picture of myself with kind of like this little mustache and shadow on my chin. And I sent it to my wife and she's like, "Ooh, hot." And I was like, awesome.
Oh, that's great. I'll have to try that out. Yeah. That'd be
fun to play around.
Yeah.
I think that you're right. Like, yes, gender is so much about our identity, but also it's not even a real thing in some ways. And like the more I've been exploring, I explored a talk the other day on reincarnation and how like a soul could be a young girl in this life right now, but she in a past life was an older man. And that makes me think like our souls don't necessarily have gender.
No.
And so like makes it so much easier to just be more fluid in it at all.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Such a big world, so many things to ponder.
Absolutely.
I might just be outing myself in another coming out for myself of I believe in reincarnation.
That's fair. Yeah.
There's just always new layers of things to explore in this life. And
yeah,
I like that we're both lifelong learners.
Love it. Yes. Yeah. It's one of the fun things that makes life worth living, I think.
Yeah.
Otherwise it would be a bit boring, wouldn't it? If we didn't learn stuff all the time. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing so many of your coming out stories with us today, Esther.
Thanks for having me. That was fun.
Thanks for listening to the Coming Out Chronicles. If you enjoyed it, give it a like. And if you think it would be helpful for someone else, please share it with them. If you'd like to connect with me, reach out on social. I'd love to support you on the next chapter of your coming out story. Until next time, this is Nancy Shadlock from Centered Life Coaching.